Have you ever looked closely at the dollar bill? I mean really closely? If you did, you'd see that what you have in your wallet is not only a valuable commodity for exchange, but a piece of art as well. Today, we're going to visit the Bureau of Engraving and Printing to find out everything you wanted to know about money without breaking any national security secrets, of course. You're going to find out that making money is no easy endeavor. But before we get into the details of how it's done, let's first take a short history lesson.
First dollar bills were done late in the colonial period by Maryland in the 1760s. Before that time, notes had tended, well, we'd had paper money since 1690, but the notes had been designated in British pounds, shillings, and pence because we were English colonies, after all. Beginning in the 1760s, the use of the word dollar on the notes began appearing. And after the War of the American Revolution began in 1775, there was a very, very big upswing in using the term dollar because it wasn't British and it was a term that most people were familiar with and it was somehow more patriotic.
By 1785, the dollar was adopted as the official currency of the United States of America, although the first dollar, which was a coin, was not actually issued until 1793. Most of the new dollars, though, were made of paper.
Beginning in the 1780s, private banks began gaining the right to issue notes. There were 3 or 4 of them by 1790 and a couple of dozen by about 1800. And by 1860 or so, there had been at one point or another something in the neighborhood of 8,000 different banks issuing notes all over the Republic.
Even though the Treasury Department was established in 1789, it took another war, in this case the American Civil War, to encourage the government to take over the issuance of currency. During the Civil War, both the North and the South were issuing their own money.
The Confederate currency, of course, we know what happened with that, but the Northern currency, notes issued in 1861 and 1862, were the direct ancestors of modern American currency today.
These first United States notes were issued by the government, but they were produced by private companies. When the Bureau of Engraving and Printing was established as a division of Treasury in 1862, things were about to change. The Bureau started by printing small denominations of currency. By the 1880s, it had a monopoly on the printing of all American notes, large and small. In addition to printing, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, as the name implies, also became responsible for designing and engraving the notes. More than 100 years later, the job of the Bureau remains the same: to design, engrave, and print all American paper currency. Now, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing should not be confused with the U.S. Mint. The Mint is another division of the Treasury Department that is responsible for making coins. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing has 2 facilities for the production of U.S. currency. The one in Washington, D.C. has been around for more than 80 years, while a more modern facility opened in Fort Worth, Texas in 1991. The Treasurer of the United States oversees both of these facilities, along with the U.S. Mint. How does someone get to be U.S. Treasurer?
I state your name.
I, Mary Ellen Withrow,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States.
How I became U.S. Treasurer was through government. 25 years ago, I was elected to a school board in Marion, Ohio, and today I'm U.S. Treasurer. And I was a county treasurer, then a state treasurer, and then U.S. Treasurer, which is the first time that's ever happened.
Mary Ellen Withrow's name first appears on 1993 series currency. Aside from her signature and that of Lloyd Benson, who was Secretary of the Treasury in 1993, this currency looks pretty similar to U.S. currency made 65 years before. That's because the size and design of U.S. currency has endured since the late 1920s. The defining feature, portraits of noted American politicians. Why portraits?
As far as the idea of why famous Americans, well, fundamentally, why not? You know, you've got to have something on it. Earlier on, we tended to use 2 things. We used allegorical figures, representations of commerce or agriculture or whatever. And secondly, we tended to use living people for a while. Like Abraham Lincoln appeared on notes while he was still alive. And Salmon P. Chase, who was Treasury Secretary at the time, appeared, well, he was printing the notes after all, I suppose he figured he had the right. He appeared on $1 bills and so forth during the war between the states.
In order to avoid such conflicts of interest, it was later decided that living folks couldn't be on the money anymore. Now, here's a test. Do you know who's who? Just about everyone knows that George Washington is on the $1 bill and Abraham Lincoln is on the 5. But without looking now, who's on the 10? It's Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury. Aside from Hamilton, 2 other non-presidents appear on U.S. currency. Benjamin Franklin's face graces the $100 bill, and Salmon P. Chase shows up on the front of the $10,000 bill, a note last printed in 1947. These portraits have been standard since the 1928 series of currency, as have the famous buildings and monuments which are engraved on the backs of the bills. The last significant design change to the nation's paper money was in 1957, when the phrase, "In God We Trust," was added. But as we'll see in a little while, big design changes are in store for U.S. currency as the nation heads for the turn of the century. Now that you know about the history of money, let's take a look at some of the artistic intricacies of the dollar bill. It's highly likely that you don't appreciate all of the work that goes into the making of American currency. It's an extremely detailed process. Every time a new Secretary of the Treasury or a new treasurer comes into office, a new series of money has to be made. Let's take a look at how the 1993 series currency was produced in order to give you an idea about how it's all done. Before new notes are printed, the Bureau's designers and engravers start doing their stuff. A big part of their job is to get the paper signatures of the Secretary of the Treasury and the Treasurer transferred onto master currency plates. How do they do that? Well, even though we're in the computer age, at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, they're still doing it the way they did it 100 years ago.
On each individual master plate, the signature is taken from the actual handwriting of the individual that the signature comes from. And first our designers will get it, look at it. If any kind of anything wrong, they make corrections on it.
The art is photographically reduced to the desired size to become the model for the engraver. The engraver then scribes an accurate line tracing, which is eventually transferred to a piece of metal. The piece of metal is then set up on a pantograph machine. This 100-year-old piece of technology is the tool used for reproducing and reducing the signature onto the master plates. On the top of the machine are 8 needles with diamonds on the end of them. As the engraver traces the signature on the plate below, the diamonds cut the impression of the reduced signature onto the master plate. It's amazing that computers haven't entered the engraving picture, but as these artists will tell you, the human touch is the intangible ingredient to making the designs come out perfect. All engraving is done so that images are contained beneath the surface of the metal, in the grooves of the plates. This is so the method of intaglio printing can be used when plate goes to press. Intaglio printing is when the metal plates are loaded with ink and the surface is wiped dry, leaving ink only in the etched-in design and letter grooves. In the printing process, blank currency sheets are fed into presses and are forced into the grooves of the engraved plates under 14 to 20 tons of pressure. The backs of the currency notes are printed first in green ink. Green ink is used because of its resistance to chemical and physical changes. The ink on the backs has to dry, so after sitting for a day or two, the faces of the sheets go through the intaglio printing process. The fronts, despite what you probably think, are printed in black, not green. Now the bills are starting to look familiar, although they are still without serial numbers. Before the serial numbers are printed, sheets must be scanned for defects like ink spots, smears, and discolorations. This is the examination process. The sheets, which contain 32 bills, are trimmed in half. Then the sheets go through a conveyor machine one at a time, and examiners with some very good eyes are responsible for picking out defective sheets. It's no easy task. Examiners work 8 hours at a clip. Every hour, thousands of sheets of currency go by. Despite these large quantities and the monotony of the job, these examiners are amazingly sharp. Their accuracy rate is 95%. When an examiner finds defective notes, they are pulled from the conveyor and put into a stack to be destroyed. The sheets that pass examination are then sent on to the cope pack stage of currency production. Cope pack stands for Currency Overprinting, Processing Equipment and Packaging. Cope pack. It's a bit easier to remember, don't you think? Now, what's wrong with this picture? These bills are missing their green Treasury seals and serial numbers, as well as their black Federal Reserve seals. This material is what's overprinted in cope pack. Now the bills look pretty familiar, although they remain in sheets of 16. So the sheets have to be chopped up by guillotine cutters into individual bills. Once cut, bills are stacked 100 to a strap and are bound with denomination bands. Then they go through a final quality check. If the examiner finds any discrepancies, the strap is pulled. But if the packet of bills makes it through this arduous journey, it gets packaged together with 9 other straps and shrink wrap. That makes a bundle which contains 1,000 notes. 4 of these bundles are then wrapped together to make a brick, which contains 4,000 notes. These bricks of money go into a vault to await delivery to the Federal Reserve. So how exactly does money get from the Bureau of Engraving and Printing into your pocket? Here's the process. The Federal Reserve System is the nation's central bank. It regulates the flow of money and credit for the nation's economic stability and growth. As we mentioned earlier, the system has 12 banks located in cities from coast to coast. Each bank is designated by a letter, which you can see on the Federal Reserve seal on the front of a note. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing manufactures currency based on amounts ordered by the Federal Reserve. Some bills are ordered to replace old notes. Others are ordered to add new money into the economy. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing ships about 8 billion notes a year to the 12 Federal Reserve banks and their 25 branches. The money is then distributed to the banks at which you do business. We can't show you the exact process of how the bills are sent out from the Bureau of Engraving and Printing because we wouldn't want to give anyone any ideas. And people, well, sometimes they do get ideas. You know, the U.S. dollar, thanks to its universal acceptability and long-lasting design, is the most counterfeited currency in the world. Since 1865, the Secret Service has been responsible for curtailing counterfeiters. It is assisted in its task by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, which has developed design techniques to deter counterfeiters. In recent times, improved methods of photocopying and printing have raised the quality of counterfeit money, so the Bureau of Engraving and Printing constantly has to update its counterfeiting prevention measures. For example, examine this $100 bill. Look closely and you'll notice the bill's material contains random blue and red fibers. Such fibers are difficult for counterfeiters to replicate. In 1991, 2 new security features were added to all bills except the $1 bill, which is rarely counterfeited. A polyester security thread is now embedded in the fiber of the currency. The thread is invisible in the reflected light of copiers or scanners, but when held up to light, it's easily visible. The thread reads USA and the denomination. Microprinting is another innovative security feature. Take a close look at the edge of the portrait on any large bill. If you have sharp eyes or a magnifying glass, you'll see the words United States of America printed around the edge. These letters, barely distinguishable to the human eye, are too small for copier reproduction. Despite all of these security features, up to $70 million in bogus bills can get into circulation every year. Now that's a relatively small amount compared to the 400 billion authentic dollars that are in circulation worldwide. But it's still a problem. So the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, working in conjunction with the Department of Treasury, is now planning to change the actual design of U.S. currency. This will be the first major redesign of U.S. currency since the 1920s. Americans will first see a new $100 bill around 1996. Other denominations will be showing up shortly thereafter.
We're changing it, and I think it's going to be gorgeous. And you're going to see a very different looking bill. It's going to look very American because it's going to have the same portraits, the same buildings, the same color, and the same size. But it's going to be a much larger portrait and moved a little bit to the left. And then there will be a watermark of that same person on the bill. The paper, it's 75% cotton and 25% linen, will have little pieces of foil in it. And those pieces of foil will not copy well. The border will be lines and dots, which there's not going to be all that fleur-de-lis that's around the bill now. It'll be just more of a simple border, and you'll see a lot more white on the bill, really. It'll be a little bit more open space on it. The optically variable ink, which will be on the higher denominations, will be noticeable. We're going to see some new currency start circulating, and the same old currency will still be circulating. So that could be very confusing to the public. But the thing they want to remember is they'll both be good. We will not recall our money. We never have. And so that's the confidence we have in our currency.
In other words, old or new, we'll still be able to take American money to the bank. Despite the design change, you can be sure U.S. money will stand the test of time. That's because it's put through rigorous tests before it ever leaves the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Believe it or not, there's money laundering going on at the Bureau. It's all part of the effort to determine the durability of the currency's paper and ink. The first step to durability testing, the money cruncher. Bills are crumpled and crunched 8 to 16 times to see if they hold up under the pressure. The vast majority do hold up pretty well, even though they look a little worse for the wear. In reality, the dollar bill undergoes a far tougher test when it's actually in circulation. But even in the real world, the average $1 note can be folded and unfolded up to 4,000 times before it wears out. Back at the Bureau's Durability Lab, U.S. currency has to take a soaking. This money is laundered in order to determine the durability of the ink. And U.S. currency does stand up under the wringer. Sometimes, though, currency can be destroyed despite its durability. But if you do somehow manage to mutilate some currency, don't worry. You can pass the buck back to the Bureau of Engraving and Printing.
The Examining and Redemption Branch is responsible for examining currency that has been mutilated in various ways. And we examine it and evaluate it for possible redemption. We receive money that has been burned, buried, animal chewed, and mutilated in all sorts of ways. Treasury does not redeem money that has been totally destroyed for obvious reasons. If we cannot identify it, then we would not know what to pay. So as long as we can identify it and you have enough money there for us to ascertain that there was at least 51% of the original note there, we will redeem it. When we receive money from floods, we do consider those to be first priority cases. The reason is because the money usually is received wet. We do not like it to sit around any longer than we possibly can because we risk the chance of it becoming moldy and mildewed, and it becomes worse than it was when we actually receive it. So we actually try to get those cases out immediately. The biggest challenge, I think, to an examiner is when they receive large containers of burned ash, because they actually have to go through those ashes piece by piece to determine the genuineness of the note and possibly reconstruct those notes. It's time-consuming and it requires a lot of patience, not to mention what it does for your eyesight. I think the worst thing in the world that could have happened was the microwave as far as money is concerned. We get a lot of money that has been burned in microwaves. People have accidentally washed their money with the laundry, and in order to dry it, they put it in the microwave, and they overcook it, and they turn their cash to ash, actually.
As you can see, American money holds up to just about any test. And because it's such a strong currency, it's also able to stand the test of time. There's no doubt that U.S. currency is among the world's most respected. In fact, many of the world's nations peg their own currency to the dollar. But certainly, the U.S. dollar is more than just a medium of exchange. As we've shown you, it's also a work of art and a big part of American history. But most importantly, U.S. currency stands as a symbol of America's strength and prosperity around the world. And you can bet your bottom dollar that it will remain so for years and years to come.